Pleased that everyone could join us this morning. So if you would, then let's see. We grab my agenda here and look at everything we're doing. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Director Dog, if you wouldn't mind leading us, that would be perfect. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and the republic
which stands one nation under God, indivisible, and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Annette. If you would call roll, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Just another reminder to mute your devices when you're not speaking so that we don't pick up background noise. And if you can use the raise hand feature to indicate if you'd like to speak or have a comment. We'll start with Director Branscombe.
Yes, just a moment. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank
Good
you.
deal. I will now mute.
Director Chapman.
Here.
Gog.
Yes.
Guerrero is absent. Jennings. Absent. Joyner.
Here.
Lauren.
Here.
Sander. Absent. Vice Chair Soon. Absent. Chair Gallardo.
Here.
And ex officio member Fong for Benny Paul.
Here.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Well, this is an opportunity for public comment for any item that is not on our agenda this morning. Lynette, do we have any public comment this morning?
We have no public communications at this time.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, then I will move on to the consent calendar and ask first, does there anyone want anything removed from the consent calendar?
Through the chair, I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second by Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got a motion and a second. Lynette, would you call roll for that vote, please?
Sure, thank you. Director Branscombe.
Yes.
Chapman.
Aye.
Gog.
Yes.
Guerrero absent. Jennings absent. Joyner.
Aye.
Lauren.
Aye.
Sander. Absent. Vice Chair Soon. Absent. Chair Gallardo.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, we are moving on. No action items today, but we're moving on for our first information item, and it's the federal fiscal year project delivery report. And Miguel Mendoza will be our presenter this morning.
Hi, good morning. Just making sure you can hear me and that you can see me as well.
Yes, we can see and hear you.
Thank you, Lynette. Yeah, good morning, Chair and Directors of the Transportation Committee. My name is Miguel Mendoza, and I'm an analyst assisting with programming and project delivery. Today, I'm happy to present this information-only item for you today, and this is the Federal Fiscal Year 2022 Project Delivery Report. And as with information-only items, the question that we're really answering today is, how did we do last year in delivering our program federal funds? Specifically, we're speaking about the congestion mitigation and air quality and our surface transportation block grant program funds, respectively CMAQ and SDBGP. Those can be a handful, so we like to use those terms for that. And I really want to begin by defining delivery in the context of our region and of federal funds. Delivering project really refers to receiving federal approval necessary to start the work on a project or a project phase. And to deliver a project, a region like ours needs two things. One is apportionment, so that's the actual cash that is given to our region, and obligation authority, which is then the permission to spend that cash or apportionment. So, without OA, apportionments are not usable, and the inverse is also true. Without apportionments, the authority to spend funds is not really very useful. We would have nothing to spend, right? And so anyone in this position, I think, will naturally ask why the two categories of funds, right? Why is there an apportionment, and then why do we have to separate that out into the permission to spend it? And the main reason really is one, it's the way that the Federal Highway Trust Fund has been set up. And the reason that that was done is because while in the beginning of a federal fiscal year, the federal government will apportion funds to regions, they can't really be sure as to how much gas tax will come into the Highway Trust Fund. And so they introduced the second category, which is OA. And what they can do then is it gives them the flexibility of adjusting that up or down to be able to adjust to either economic changes or to perhaps less revenue than they thought, or more revenue than they thought. And so with those two things in mind, and those are some terms that that you may have read in the staff report, I want to also go over briefly our project delivery plan process, because our delivery for every year is governed by our project delivery plan process. And the full plan is attached in this item. And so this is really the policy framework that governs how we prioritize project delivery in our region. And the plan is brought to this committee and to the board yearly for approval, but essentially it's kind of remained unchanged over the last few years, just because of how effective it has been at delivering projects. So I won't go over the whole plan, but I do have a couple of key points that I want to bring up on it. And one is that it encourages early delivery. We use a first come, first serve system after February 1st. And so if sponsors are ready to go early, they are more likely to deliver. And the inverse, again, being true, is if sponsors wait too long, or if a lot of projects come in before them, the region, we may run out of available funds for them. However, fear not, for anyone that comes in a little later, perhaps than they would like, maybe experiencing some delays or just the nature of the project, there are a couple of options that the plan presents. And there's a few of those, but I really want to talk about one that we've been relatively successful at in the past. And that's taking loans of apportionments from other regions, so from other MPOs. These loans are interest-free and free of fees, which seems amazing. I think in our personal lives, we would love to take interest-free loans. But really it benefits both SACOG and other regions. It benefits us in the way that we can deliver projects early. We may have a project that wasn't planned to start until 2 years from now, but if we have the funds and they're ready to go, we can start them now, right? That would save us in money because of inflation, but also be able to put infrastructure down that really, benefits the region earlier. And it helps other regions out because if they're not ready to deliver projects, any funds that remain unused after a certain number of years is eligible to be used and taken by the state, right? They're saying, hey, you're not using your funds, we'll use it for you. And so by loaning them out to other regions that may be able to use it, they're kind of deferring, or they're getting rid of it in their books. And then when we pay them back, they can use it then. So with all of that in mind, and I know it's a little bit of background, I want to go over some brief numbers, and hopefully I can keep it simple enough. So in 2022, federal fiscal year 2022, our region, we started with about 66 million of CMAQ and SDBGP funds. Because of the loans that I just spoke about, we had to pay about 24 million in the beginning from previous year's loans. But we were also very successful in obtaining 27 million in loans. So, 66 minus 24 plus 27, we're kind of back where we started. And so what this allowed us to do is deliver the full almost $69 million in funds. And so while that's a great big number, I think it helps to kind of talk about what that really means. So these 69 million in funds is made up of 42 projects, and a list is attached as part of this item. And so these 42 projects, it encompasses all 6 counties of our region, and all of them are in varying phases of completion. So 16 of them were able to just start, right? We were able to start with our PE, or preliminary engineering phase. And 4 were able to continue along with the process where they're right-of-way phases. And lastly, 22 were able to start or continue their construction phases. So we're seeing projects here that are almost complete with construction, or really just beginning with their PE phases. And these projects are not, selected willy-nilly, or not just projects that apply and get it. So these are projects that both support our Metropolitan Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy, and they have all been funded with previous SACOG, PCTPA, or Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, and EDCTC, El Dorado County Transportation Commission funding rounds. And so the project delivery arm, really, the program that I'm assisting with, is kind of, in effect, putting into reality what we worked hard to plan and assess and award in those prior funding rounds. And while I'm the one bringing these projects up today, and while I'm the one that's able to say, hey, look at this large amount of money that we've been able to use, and the dozens of projects we were able to support, really all the credit goes to your public works staff that we work closely with to deliver these projects, and to Caltrans, who's able to assist us in the process. And over the years, we've developed these relationships, and we hope to continue the collaboration, the strong delivery that we have, and in order to advance our regional goals. And I would like to say, with these projects, the way that we work with your region, with our public works staff, to deliver these projects takes a lot of time and energy on their side as well as ours. And I want to say that they do a fantastic job. And I could speak all day about how great they are. But nonetheless, feel free to peruse that list, look at the projects. There's some really interesting ones on there and some important ones, ones that we can talk about if you'd like. But thank you for your time. I'm going to conclude my part here, but I'm happy to take comments or questions. I know that sometimes this can be something we can explore further.
Well, thank you so much, Miguel. Any questions this morning? Oh, I see a hand up. Go ahead. Director Ranscombe, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm looking at the list of projects that obligated the STBG or CMAQ funds during fiscal year 22. And they are not differentiated as between STBG or CMAQ. I would be very interested in seeing the distribution as between those two.
Absolutely, yeah. We can do a differentiation on those. And I will note that some projects will have a combination of both.
Well, then break out by project. I'm curious about that. And what's the now fiscal year 2022? I presume you're on a September or a June fiscal year.
No, so the federal fiscal year 2022 is from October of 21 to
yeah. Okay, so it's a September.
Yes,
so in the current fiscal year, what funds are available particularly for CMAQ?
So for our current fiscal year this year, if you'd allow me to pull it up on my end, and you're speaking of federal fiscal year 23?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for federal fiscal year 23, our estimates for CMAQ so far is around 28 million. That's subject to change, however.
Now, what's that based on? Is that based on projects submitted, or what's the 28 million based on?
The 28 million is based on population apportionment. So that's what we get in the beginning. What we do with that number is we're given estimates a year or two in advance from the state, from Caltrans, and we work to program up to that number with projects. And so the 28 million, however, will change probably in a few months when they get more final numbers on what the state or what the federal highway fund receives.
Oh, thank you for that information. Marysville has a significant congestion problem, which leads to air quality problems. And this is very interesting to us. We'll pay close attention. Thank you. And I will be interested in seeing where that money went in the last fiscal year. And this, the funds are distributed based on applications of projects. Is that it?
Yeah.
Correct.
Just
Sorry,
that's all right, Director Branscombe. What you're seeing here really is, and Miguel, you can kind of maybe get more specific for us, but you're seeing the delivery of projects that were awarded years ago, right? So
Yes.
You really start with what you'll get probably next month. You will get our staff recommendations for what we call the 4-county funding round. And you'll see, I think, our estimates on which fiscal years of money those are. So what you're seeing here is kind of the status update, if you will, of projects that were competitively awarded. We could look back at the actual years, but a while ago, right? So this is how successful are they in getting delivered?
And quickly, if I'm displaying my ignorance, so be it. I won't be ignorant after I display it. Now, when these projects or when the opening gun comes on timing for new proposals, are those proposals? I presume they're published or they're distributed to somebody. How's that work?
It works just like you're about to see how it works in a month, because we will come to you as the Transportation Committee with a recommendation. Right, all of the 4 counties, including your city, have put in applications right now to our 2023 funding round. 22-23.
Supposed to be the regional. Yeah.
So you've put your applications in. We've got review panels going through them, and we're sorting through everything, and we'll make a recommendation. So the starting gun in some ways was the opening of the application period.
Yeah, they have different.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate the questions. We all learn from that. Any other questions on this item? All right, I'm not seeing any hands up. Miguel, I had just one question on when you talked about the gas tax. Do we have any idea where we're at on the gas tax, or what we anticipate will be on gas tax? Or what's the trend?
Yeah, all of these, I think so early in the year, and I say early, right, which is all relative. What we have are estimates. So in terms of CMAQ and SCBG and probably the full gas tax amount, and we're talking, and when I'm speaking about these funds, these are the federal funds. So federally, we all just have estimates right now, and they were probably provided a couple of years ago. And they don't really update them until a new infrastructure bill is approved. So these could be very much out of date. So short answer to your question, all we have are really wild guesses. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly where we are yet, but they will adjust these numbers maybe in a couple of months if the trend continues to finalize what our region will receive.
I feel like I hate bringing it up always with that strange year that I'm not going to name it anything, but I figure we're all kind of, our estimates are a little more of a guess these days.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the presentation, and we'll look forward to the next one. All right, well, we are going to be moving on now, and it is Rosie, you are going to be up next with our Engage, Empower, and Implement update.
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
Good to see you.
Hello, everybody. I will just share my slide very quick. Okay. I'm assuming it's visible to folks properly. Okay, well, good morning, Chair Gallardo, members of the committee. My name is Rosie Ramos, and I am the External Relations Group Lead and the Project Manager for the Engage, Empower, Implement program. And I will also be accompanied by my colleague, Nicole Zeeling Porter, during this presentation. So we're here today to just give you an update because the last time we were here was in October of 2023. The months really do just fly by. But before I dive into sort of where we're at with the program, I want to just give you a little bit of background and context for how we're thinking about this, as well as this being a refresher and introduction for some of our newer board members as well. So I want to start off by acknowledging that there's about 150 elected officials in our region, including yourselves and the SACOG board. 150 people that have taken on that role to represent our people, our communities. And I, first of all, just want to say thank you because it is a very, very difficult job. And working in this space together here at SACOG, we recognize that it's a hard job because you have to make decisions and choices. And the reality is that we have limited resources and we want to make the most of them and make the decisions at the regional level that can benefit as many constituents as we can. At the same time, while there's 150 elected officials, there's 2.6 million people in our region. That's a lot. So while this is not necessarily an accurate split, if you were to just split up the 2.6 million amongst the about 150 elected officials, we would be at about 17,000 people for each of you to represent. And that's a lot of relationships to maintain, a lot of touch points. And I recognize some of you actually represent more or less, but this is just for illustrative purposes, if you will. And so it's a lot to connect with every single person or meet every single interest that everyone has. And so this is where we really want to recognize that there's also a lot of, there's also a lot of community leaders at the local level that can really offer a lot of connections and relationships that sometimes are just not possible at the staff level, at the elected level to have. And so we really want to emphasize that this is why we're doing this Engage, Empower, Implement. It's about connecting with the CBOs that can actually have much broader touch points because of the limitations that it's just physically not possible for all of us to connect with so many people. And so this, I share this because this is really the vision about EEI. It's about helping all of us do more organic community-led planning. And so really bringing in our CBOs to help us do that decision-making, bringing them into the development of projects. And so these are just some visual representations to see how many more touch points can we get when we bring in our community partners. And so I really want to just give that context so you know how we're thinking about this program, and really also start off with saying that this project has been in the works since 2020 for those of you that are new. During the 2020 funding round framework adoption of the time, EEI was given $3 million as a set aside for investing in the region's disinvested communities. And so since then, through 2021, staff has been working to develop the budget and the framework process, if you will, that year. At the same time, we were also doing a lot of work with our racial equity and inclusion working group that many of you sit on. We created the equity statement and the racial equity action plan, which EEI has a lot of objectives within that plan itself. And so really in 2022 is when we started to do more of the external work with this project. In 2022, we came to the board and asked for an RFP, asking for the permission to release an RFP. And because, as I mentioned, we have been wanting to do this with CBOs, our original intent was to bring on a CBO as a consultant, if you will, to help us develop the process. It didn't quite work out, and that was a lot of lessons learned for us, because what we learned in that effort through that first RFP was that a lot of CBOs were not necessarily ready to hop on and join us in this process at that time. There was a lot of capacity issues. And for the folks that were a little bit bigger and did have capacity, the procurement rules that we have, if they would have participated in the development of the EEI program, they would not have been allowed to do the implementation side. And so that was something that they weren't, and we also recognize that we didn't want to really happen because we need them at the implementation end. And so we had to scrap that RFP. We did a second one middle of last year to bring on a consultant, and we hired HRNA advisors with their sub AIM Consulting, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. And so we finalized that procurement and got a contract signed at the end of last year. And so the last few months of 2023 have been a lot of level setting with our consultant, planning out the work for the year and getting ready to do a lot of the hands-on work with the CBOs and the jurisdictions and asking the key questions that we will be asking. So with that background, I want to hand it over to Nicole to give you a little bit more information as to what we're doing right now and where we're going and a little bit of our timeline that you can expect from us.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Zealing-Porter, Innovative Mobility Program Analyst and Shared Micromobility Lead here at SACOG. Thank you, Rosie, for bringing us up to speed. I'd like to take a few minutes to focus on where are we at now with EEI. So our current phase of this program has a few key objectives. First and foremost, we want to listen to and learn from our region's community-based organizations on how we can best collaborate and partner with them. And then we'll bring along our member jurisdictions as part of this process to share new best practices for community engagement and partnerships. And this will ultimately lead us to developing a funding program that includes guidelines, tools, and resources for both our community-based organizations and cities and counties to use when they begin justice-based planning practices. So our work with our CBOs and member agencies will focus on the topics that you see here. We'll ask questions such as, what are the most pressing needs in our communities? And what level of support should an EEI project have? And how do we measure that public support? Who has experience in applying to SACOG funding opportunities in the past? Who hasn't and why not? How will applicants be scored and who scores them? And finally, how will we evaluate the overall impacts of the EEI funding program? What are our success measures? All of the work from this current phase of EEI will result in a funding program that we can launch by the end of this year and ultimately serve our main objective for the EEI program, which is to create a pipeline of equitable, safe, and sustainable projects throughout the 6-county SACOG region that are rooted in community-based planning efforts. And as a result of this effort, we will not only be able to provide the tools, resources, and incentives that really make it possible for our public agencies to deliver equitable projects, but will also better position the greater Sacramento region for competitive state and federal funding opportunities. So what's next for EEI? So actually within the next week on April 11th, we'll be kicking off our program engagement with a CBO roundtable. And we've invited more than 120 organizations to participate. And so far 30 have expressed interest in plan on attending. I do want to note that if you have other organizations that you would like us to reach out to, please let Rosie or myself know and we can invite them to this upcoming event and future focus group meetings. So then the next time that you'll hear from us is this summer. And by then we'll have key findings from our engagement efforts with our CBOs, and then we can bring forward key elements of our draft funding program framework to all of you in August, and then a final funding program framework and a quick to follow launch of our funding program in the fall. And we're ultimately targeting awarding our first EEI grants in early 2024.
Thanks, Nicole. And so with that, we'll take any questions or comments. As Nicole mentioned, we are doing engagement already, or we're starting it off next week. This is the first roundtable, and we'll have it recorded and posted on our website. But if there's organizations that you want us to connect with that we haven't connected with already, let us know. There's focus groups. We're going to be doing one-on-ones. There's going to be surveys that we do. So there's a lot of opportunity for engagement.
Thank you so much, Rosie and Nicole. I appreciate that information, and I'll look to see if I have any questions from our team. I'm not seeing any hands up. You covered it well. Thank you so much. We'll look forward to talking to you again then this summer.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You bet. Well, our last information item today is with clearly something I think we're all quite excited with this weather to talk about, and it's our 2025 blueprint. And let's talk pavement. Sam is going to be our presenter.
Thank you, Chair Guy Elder. It's exciting to hear someone say they're excited to talk about pavement. That's going to be great. So good afternoon. I'm Sam Shelton, the
Let's
senior
just say
analyst
we're
at
all hearing a
SACOG.
lot about pavement.
Yep. And you'll hear a lot about it today. We're going to go into a lot of detail today. Today's Blueprint Pathway Update is about taking a long-term look at future pavement maintenance and rehabilitation costs. We're going to be combining land use pathway data discussed during last month's lunar presentations as part of last month's board info item. And we're going to be combining that with pavement deterioration data and cost data we've been able to recently obtain throughout the region. Now, some of this is building on last month's lunar and board info items on land use assumptions that are part of each blueprint pathway. Since that March presentation was punted to this month's board meeting, please do interrupt me if you have any questions or anything that needs further explanation. We do intend to have the land use presentation come back at this month's board meeting. So anything I can't answer today, I apologize. I'm not a land use planner, so you'll have to bear with me on some of this. But we'll be sure to have Dov Caden respond to those questions at the next board meeting. So you've probably seen this house before, which is a lot like our region today. We've got a maintenance problem in the roof, but we have ambitions to add on. As we develop the transportation project investment list for the blueprint, we need to balance our investments between expanding capacity and fixing what we have first. So first I'll,
Sorry.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I gotta click the share button this time. That'll help. Thank you.
Right.
Too excited to talk about pavement. That's what happened. All right. So first, I'll bring everyone up to speed on pavement rehabilitation costs. These are from statewide reports or detailed conditions. Then I'll explain how we've been estimating costs using pavement management data and land use pathway data. Finally, we'll discuss some key policy issues to guide future policy discussions about prioritizing system maintenance investments at both the regional and local scales for the 2025 blueprint. Pavement conditions can be measured in a number of ways, but the most used metric in our region is the pavement condition index, which is a number from 0 to 100. Good streets with very little cracking are above 70, so that's the PCI 75 photo you see in the top left. Fair streets are between 50 and 70, as seen in the PCI 63 photo, where you can see some cracking along the lanes, some trench cuts that have damaged the pavement, maybe some big alligator cracks or raveling where the binding agent on the top of the pavement has come off and you're starting to see a lot rougher pavement. Poor and failed streets are between 25 and 50 and all the way down to 0, as seen in the photos on the right side. Both streets show heavy cracking and raveling, and lastly, some potholes, some of them which are patched, some of them are not. You know, while we might tolerate driving on poor roads, these conditions categories were crafted to link their conditions to the style of required pavement treatment and those costs. This is a typical pavement condition index, a PCI cost slide that we borrowed from the city of Sacramento's 2020 pavement report. As pavement conditions get worse over time from left to right, those costs go up quickly. Deferring maintenance can multiply costs, where reconstructing one failed street at $82 a square yard is equivalent to preserving 20 good streets at $4 per square yard. So how bad is it out there? Let's start with a few statewide reports, such as the Caltrans Transportation Asset Management Plan and the Cal Cities and CSAC Local Streets and Roads Needs Assessment. Caltrans is responsible for reporting on the national highway system. So those are roads that are principal arterials or higher, such as Watt Avenue or Sierra College or Sunrise Boulevard, for every mile of locally maintained national highway system. So not the state highways. Almost 1 in 4 in our region are in poor condition, with the rest in fair condition and becoming poor. Most of our region's NHS lane miles are in the city of Sacramento and Sacramento County. We're in Sacramento County, 1 of 3 of our lane miles are in poor condition. Now, not every city and county has locally maintained NHS miles. There are 8 jurisdictions that don't, such as in Yuba and Sutter counties. Caltrans maintains those lane miles, such as SR 99 and State Route 20. Here's a map of that data. This is the last time that Caltrans drove LiDAR trucks around on your streets. and coded those street pavement conditions in good to fair to poor. Sometimes they had some missing information, but these are all the NHS lane miles. So you're seeing some of the statewide routes. These are just the locally maintained national highway miles. Overall, the region's roadway conditions at a county level fell from good to fair ratings to at-risk or poor ratings between 2008 and 2020, based on those PCI scores compiled for our region. An exception to this trend is Yuba County, where in 2019, they leveraged SB1 funding with a loan from their water agency to quickly address 4 times more pavement than they could with their annual expected SB1 funds. Here's why Yuba County did that. The green lines on both of these charts show long-term cost savings of proactive maintenance. On the chart on the left is an example of multiple cheap treatments over time. So each of these green lines is one treatment that's designed to raise the PCI of that street in a cost-effective manner. When you proactively invest in roadways regularly, you can avoid those major rehabilitation costs. Otherwise, you become trapped in a more reactive pavement management system. So when the pavement management trails off too far, you can only do major reconstruction, and you wind up being more of this red line here. So over the life cycles of streets, if you're only making limited investments, your pavement conditions will remain quite poor, and you'll wind up spending more money over time. That's mainly because that you can't put good pavement on bad pavement. Those cracks from the old pavement will reflect through a cheaper pavement job, and those cheaper pavement jobs won't be any good. So you wind up being trapped in those reactive pavement cycles if you're not careful. So what will it take for our region to get closer to that proactive, best practiced pavement actions? Well, according to surveys from our jurisdictions, at this point, it's closer to an additional 6.8 billion over the next 10 years will be needed. So that's 6.8 billion in investments over 10 years across all of our jurisdictions in our region. And this is based on surveys from the Local Streets and Roads report compiled by Cal Cities and CSAC. So where would we find money like that? Well, yes, SB1 is helping, but it's clearly not enough. You can see the pink bars starting in 2018 on the chart on the left of various state, local, and federal funds. This is funding sources for pavement, and it's the small pink bars in the top right of that left chart. So these pink bars here, and that was a good shot in the arm for our local agencies. They wound up spending a lot of that money on rehab and reconstruction in these later fiscal years, trying to catch up and get ahead of that curve so they can begin doing proper maintenance. The 2020 Local Streets and Roads report also shows us that most counties are in a similar boat of at-risk conditions between PCI 50 and 70, all of the different blue counties you see on the map on the left. But self-help counties with their own local sales taxes, like in the Bay Area or in Southern California, are doing much better at addressing their 10-year backlogs by focusing their tax measures on roadway maintenance and aggressively using pavement management software to make the most of their funding. So you can see the chart on the right, the yellow counties are investing between 40 to 60% of that backlog, that 10-year needs, where other counties are unable to reach that limit. They're less than 20%, such as in many of our counties in our region. But to really understand our local roadway pavement issues, we can't rely on national highway system data or local streets and roads statewide reports. We need to get our own data. SACOG worked in partnership with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission to access pavement management software called Street Safer for 20 of our 28 jurisdictions that use the software. Where you can see on this map, green streets are above 70 PCI, yellow streets are in fair condition above 50, and red streets are at 50 or below PCI. We can take a closer look at the detail in this map, where we can see our region's conditions at a quite high resolution at very local streets. Street Saver can also show us the projected remaining life on those streets, not just a PCI number that can be hard to relate to the public. But green streets have 25 years remaining in their life cycle. Yellow streets have between 5 and 25 years left, and red streets have less than 5 years to function as a paved street. Now, there are limitations to this data. It relies on routine inspections to calibrate its model and forecasting. Green roadways have been inspected in the last 3 years, where yellow roadways were last inspected 6 years ago, and red roadways were inspected more than 6 years ago. So our pavement software is running overtime to try to project out from older data. StreetSaver is also a powerful tool to help craft scenarios based on available funding or targeted conditions. But when there's missing data, such as in Roseville on the map on the left, or future roadway networks not yet built, such as thinking out to 2050, like what we have to do, the scenario analysis program in StreetSaver can't really help us. It also does a pretty poor job of analyzing multi-jurisdictional networks, where if you ask the computer program to invest efficiently across many jurisdictions, it's going to put that cash over many years on the streets that are in good condition to do that efficiently, and it tends to ignore the pavement that's in poor condition. Well, when you do that across many jurisdictions, it tends to completely ignore whole jurisdictions. So we needed to augment how StreetSaver was going to help us with this analysis. So how can we reliably estimate pavement costs into the future? So we adjusted our costs based on city and county local pavement reports that your public staff have delivered, public works staff have delivered to you at your council meetings and board of supervisor meetings. We then matched those costs with the developed parcels in each of the blueprint pathways with the expected pavement coverage. So if you look at the photo on the right, you can see that when we see many parcels developing, we can expect a certain percentage of those parcels to be pavement. So we were able to calibrate that. So each parcel used in a blueprint pathway was assigned a 20-year life cycle pavement cost calibrated to today's existing conditions, leveraging all of the great StreetSaver data that we have. So what blueprint pathway parcels am I talking about? Here's a quick refresher, if you recall some of the information items from last month about each of the 3 blueprint pathways. The outward expansion and limited infill pathway in the top right corner, where you can see a lot more rural residential development happening in El Dorado County. If you're looking at this small map, those are kind of some of the trends you can see. Some of the balanced infill and phased expansion in the bottom left corner, that's closer to our existing plan. And the focused infill and limited expansion map in the bottom right corner, which focuses an awful lot more on the existing urban footprint. So before I begin sharing some various charts about pavement costs, I wanted to walk through a few key variables. Many of our charts focus on key differences found in the data. We see the largest differences happening between outward expansion and focused infill pathways. We also crafted 3 ranges of estimates: low mainly for preventative maintenance costs, medium mostly for maintaining conditions for cities and counties in good shape, and generally slow deterioration for cities and counties in poor shape, and then a high estimate to help us improve conditions, really trying to hit a PCI target that's closer to 70 across the region. These are 20-year cumulative costs. So when you look at cost estimates from your local plans, it's kind of apples and oranges. We're talking about cumulative costs out to 2050. We also look at additional metrics such as flood-prone areas, fire severity zones, and pollution vulnerability areas identified by the state of California. So the current 2020 MTP SCS, our plan, has a local roadway maintenance total budget of $6.4 billion. These are billions, not millions, excuse the M's here, which it already falls short of what we need by 400 to 500 million per year of our projected needs. Funding at our current plans level may slow deterioration of our region's pavement conditions on average, but is insufficient to turn the corner on improving the conditions of our region's roadway network. The region needs nearly double the maintenance and rehabilitation investment compared to our plan. So if you recall that slide about the 6.8 billion in needs that was identified by the state report, you can see that big chunk that's sitting in these higher estimates here. Oh, I clicked on something. There we go. Let's dive a little deeper into how pathways affect specific jurisdictions. Poor to fair pavement conditions today, those are the numbers on the bottom of the chart off to the left, combined with system expansion in the future, such as within the outward expansion pathway, can result in significant additional costs for some jurisdictions looking to add additional roadway capacity to accommodate those new growth areas. So these would be jurisdictions off to the left side of this chart, 48, 50, 53 in the poor PCI and lower at-risk levels. And if they had quite a bit of growth happening in the outward expansion pathway versus infill focus pathway, we were seeing some large numbers popping up there. So in some of those jurisdictions, we're seeing those costs increase 3 times that of the future that focuses on more infill versus limited outward development. Now, if you're a jurisdiction on the right side of the chart, don't get too comfortable. Yes, it might seem like your agency is in a better position to afford new pavement, but that's largely based on the logic of our estimation. If you have good pavement now, you're more likely to be able to manage all costs in the future. This is a risk that your agencies could begin to slide to the left and become more exposed to those added lane miles of pavement to manage. Now, does outward growth always result in the highest cost estimate? No. In some jurisdictions, balanced infill or focused infill pathways have marginally higher costs than the outward growth pathway. Other jurisdiction costs are nearly the same across all pathways. So balanced infill, we see like a 2.9% higher cost in GALT. These are really small percentages when you're thinking of the billions that we have to add to our pavement investment across out to 2050. Now, the expansion of our roadway system into flood or fire-prone areas to accommodate new growth comes with additional risk and potential costs compared to more rural communities in unincorporated parts of the region. Approaches to providing roadway improvements in these areas for purposes of improving emergency response and evacuation planning should be considered carefully when those improvements also facilitate additional housing or job growth that could expose more people and property to the risks of flood or fire events. So this chart shows the difference in costs between the outward growth pathway and the focused infill pathway subject to flooding. So these are parcels that are different from those pathways and the applied pavement costs that are on those parcels. So you can see in Yuba County, Sutter, Sacramento County, Wheatland, those are some of the top jurisdictions that we're seeing that are exposing those pavement costs due to flooding. This next chart is crafted in a similar way for fire severity zones identified by CAL FIRE, where if you recall the map of pathways, we did see a lot of rural residential development in El Dorado. That's why their bar is so much higher than the other jurisdictions. Now, growth and investment in infill areas can increase the utilization of existing roadways, thus adding to the wear and tear on these facilities that may already be declining due to limited maintenance funding today. It'll be important to consider how growth within the current developed footprint in the region will affect existing communities, especially those communities that are particularly vulnerable following decades of underinvestment. So using the state identified pollution vulnerable areas, we can see those differences by pathway, where in Sacramento County, that trend is most pronounced. Well, now that you have a taste of some of the key policy issues we're seeing about future pavement costs between pathways, I wanted to return to one of the larger trade-offs that you'll need to consider as we develop blueprint policy about how we balance investment in the expansion of our system with fixing it first. During our project nomination process for the plan in 2022, project sponsors submitted over $11 billion in capacity increasing improvements, many of which are seeking competitive grant funding before 2035, as you can see in this small blue bar chart here. The board will ultimately use what we've learned from these different pathway analyses to inform a final preferred pathway that'll balance the region's mobility needs with the realities of our limited future dollars. So the next blueprint pathway discussion will be about system performance and travel demand model results. And today we're looking for questions and input about how we can use this information to help shape a preferred pathway. I'd be happy to answer any questions to help facilitate your discussion.
Well, thank you. That is a lot to digest, and it's absolutely fascinating for me. So I appreciate it very much. I'll open it up first to our team for questions. And I apologize if I'm not seeing any hands, so if I'm missing something, please let me know. I know, I'm trying to decide if it's just so much to absorb there. I think that, of course, I know for me, looking at it in the detail is the fascinating piece of this. And I'm trying to write all these notes to take back to my council to talk about it. One question that you talked about on the funding, I know that I had, I look at 65 for us, and 65 is an impediment to some economic growth that we want. If we can expand 65, I'll get business growth that I'm looking for, which will then provide more income to fix the road. So I guess, how do you balance that piece?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the revenue that's used for pavement doesn't necessarily follow all the economic development that you're hoping will pay for it. There's many different ways to pay for pavement. And a majority of the revenues that you saw in the prior charts for pavement come from local, state, and federal sources, including the SB1 taxes. So you're looking at excise taxes or fuel taxes on those cars that are driven around. And we're seeing that tax base erode as cars get more efficient. So I think the revenue aspect of worrying about of tying those revenues from the growth that you're hoping will pay for the pavement may not be the surest bet. Where the information I shared today, I'm hoping that it shows you the risks of that economic expansion when it comes to how much more pavement that your public works directors will be responsible for.
Thank you. Well, I think it also was very interesting to me on your fire risk communities versus your flood risk communities. We all have a different type of risk, but every community, it seems, is impacted with those. Any other questions from our team? They're letting you on.
I wasn't sure if that was
Yeah,
somebody.
there you go, please. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, I think this is probably one of the first, in addition to Dov Caden did some setup on these pathways. We know it's a lot of information, and you're going to get a lot more in the coming months. And so, you know, either now or honestly, even just to us as staff, help us figure out what, you know, right size the information, any questions you may have, even that can help us refine, right, as we present more. It always very helpful to understand, you know, what's clear, what's not clear, what outstanding questions do you have, what would be more helpful in how we present this, because we know we can throw a lot of numbers at you. I'm not saying that's what we did today. I think Sam's presentation was super interesting, but there's a lot more of this to come, and this is always the challenge we have, right, with a lot of technical data. How do we distill it down so that it is you said it's a lot to digest, right, Chair Gallardo? So you have any thoughts on this as we go and over the next few months, giving you a lot more of these kind of data dumps. We'll do the best on our analysis, but your feedback would be greatly appreciated.
Chair Gallardo, we have a public comment on this item. Would you like to take that comment now?
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. The comment is from Rick Carter. Rick, if you can hear me, you're in the meeting and you can go ahead and make your comment.
Thank you. Good morning, board members. Sam, I did have a question for you on the kind of the revenue assumptions that went into this. Certainly, if you're adding, you know, pavement and you're adding lane miles, then there's an increased maintenance need. But in my experience, kind of the greenfield type developments, those typically come with requirements from the local agencies for property tax assessments that cover pavement maintenance in those areas. And I think that's kind of less common with infill development. So did you do any comparisons or any assumption differences between revenue between the kind of the infill and the greenfield outward expansion?
Actually, Rick, I didn't do any revenue analysis about how people are paying for streets and roads now versus into the future. We'll talk an awful lot more about revenues later on during the plan development process with regard to financial constraint. I mostly focused on expenditures and where that pavement would be across the different pathways, trying to understand future roadway networks and their impact on the total amount that you would have to spend. So while there might be some instances where you can cover costs through pavement, like in, I believe Elk Grove does a good job of this with different districts. It remains to be seen if they can really keep up with that. And I'd love to learn more about how that's done across the region as we dive deeper into the revenues themselves.
Thanks. I think that's an important aspect. I don't know how that'll pencil out over time, but I think that's something that should be part of the consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Any other public comment on this item?
There's no other public comment.
Well, thank you. I say I really appreciated this, and I think I'm going to get to do a deep dive in the details. And it for me, it helps to obviously the long term, but I think it also gives us a pretty good idea of where we are. And with these storms, I think we've all been impacted too. So I think that's another little piece that I keep in the back of my mind, that there was more deterioration than we've been used to seeing as well. Appreciate it very much. Well, thank you, team. I think we are moving on to other matters. And Christina, I think you had an announcement you were going to share.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gallardo. I just wanted to remind everyone that we don't have a lunch session today after this, so you'll all be free to go about your day without a lunch session. That was it. Easy day for you all.
The lunch sessions is not near as fun without a lunch also. So that's, thank you for that. Any other matters? Anyone have anything they'd like to share today? All right. Well, it's been marvelous to see everyone. Thank you for your patience and for your participation. And our next meeting will be Thursday, May the 4th, same time, 10 a.m. Look forward to seeing you all again. And hopefully we get a little nice break in the weather and you guys have a wonderful weekend that's coming up. Thank you all so much. We are adjourned.